If everyone could have a seat now, and Greg, cue the music. The time is overdue for people like me and you to know the way to truth is love and unity to all God's children. It should be a great event, and a whole day should be spent in full remembrance of those who lived and died for the oneness of all people. Some folks may be wondering, why are we playing the happy birthday song? But this song, I would argue, is one of the greater protest songs ever written. It's written by Stevie Wonder, and it was released in 1980. And the purpose of the song was to mobilize and organize for the King holiday. Many people today don't recognize that, particularly by the 1970s, King's legacy was not necessarily one that many people, or all people for that matter, were cheering and celebrating, and particularly the legacy of the civil rights movement. There were folks who personally did not agree with King, and there were folks who didn't like the results of what was happening at that time. So that there were folks who were mobilizing and using culture, music, and song and other methods to push to gain a day to celebrate not just King, but those who were leaders and members and workers in the freedom movement, the movement for civil rights here in the United States. I also think it's a great irony that in the end, when it was passed, it was actually signed by someone who actually hadn't been a big advocate of civil rights, Ronald Reagan. But it shows the power of organizing. It shows the power of community. Hi, I'm Hubert Dixon III. I'm a member here at Cedar Ridge Community Church. I'm often at the barn working with our youth team with our middle school and high school students, and I'm and also a former member of our board of trustees. Just for full disclosure, Matthew contacted myself and my wife Sarah on Wednesday, let us knowing that his father had passed and his need to go back home to support his mother and to deal with all the things that are part of the passing of a parent, and asked would we share some reflections. So we started working on this. Sarah unfortunately isn't here because she is sick. But she's been very helpful. Anything in the next few minutes that is thoughtful and good, and it's like, ooh, that's a good point. She probably came up with that. And if it seems that's a little long, and why is he like just listing off people and talking about history in some kind of way? That's probably me. So so we'll see how this all works together. So one of the things I wanted to do is to give an opportunity to hear King in his own words, share some of the thoughts and his that he shared as part of his work, and also to continue with the theme of that this day, which is tomorrow, the King holiday, was created not just as a way of representing this one individual, but the work of many, many people that over the course of many years helped to transform many elements here in our country, and were inspired by others from other countries, and has been inspirations for folks around the world. Also, I want to make my goal, but successful, is to make connections to not just thinking about the past, but thinking about our present, and that our past is not that far away from us. Some of us have been very overwhelmed in the last year in terms of things that powers in our country have been engaged in against those who have the least. But this isn't new for our history. And the clip we're about to show is from Dr. King's acceptance speech of the Nobel Peace Prize. But just in the prior 18 months before this speech was in December of 1964, you had the March on Washington, you had the murder of the 4 girls at the 16th Avenue Baptist Church in Birmingham. You had the assassination of President Kennedy. You had the long Children's Crusade organizing effort in Birmingham, which the imagery that folks see of dogs attacking people and water hoses, that's where most of the time when you see those images, that imagery, those pictures, they're coming from Birmingham, and those are young people. And also the Mississippi Summer of '64, where 3 civil rights workers were brutally murdered. All of those events all happened in less than 18 months or a year and a half before this presentation that King gives in acceptance of the Nobel Peace Prize.
Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I accept the Nobel Prize for Peace at a moment when 22 million Negroes of the United States are engaged in a creative battle to end the long night of racial injustice. I accept this award on behalf of the civil rights movement, which is moving with determination and a majestic scorn for risk and danger to establish a reign of freedom and a rule of justice. I am mindful that only yesterday in Birmingham, Alabama, our children crying out for brotherhood were answered with fire hoses, snarling dogs, and even death. I am mindful that only yesterday in Philadelphia, Mississippi, young people seeking to secure the right to vote were brutalized and murdered. I am mindful that debilitating and grinding poverty afflicts my people and chains them to the lowest rung of the economic ladder. Therefore, I must ask why this prize is awarded to a movement which is beleaguered and committed to unrelenting struggle, to a movement which has not yet won the very peace and brotherhood which is the essence of the Nobel Prize. After contemplation, I conclude that this award, which I receive on behalf of that movement, is a profound recognition that nonviolence is the answer to the crucial political and moral questions of our time. The need for man to overcome oppression and violence without resorting to violence and oppression. Civilization and violence are antithetical concepts. Negroes of the United States, following the people of India, have demonstrated that nonviolence is not sterile passivity, but a powerful moral force which makes for social transformation. Sooner or later, all the peoples of the world will have to discover a way to live together in peace.
Now, I have to be honest. When I was a kid, I didn't grow up in a household that really was into the nonviolence part. I was raised by my mama and daddy that if somebody hits you, you hit them back. So that element of nonviolence in terms of change didn't resonate with me as a child. However, one part that did, that wasn't unique just to King, but that moral, that prophetic, that biblical element that King and others spoke to in terms of justice was something that did speak to me and was nurtured by my family and nurtured by the community which I grew up in. And particularly the words of the prophet Micah. He has told you, O mortal, what is good? What does the Lord require of you? But to do justice and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. To do justice, love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. That was and is a moral imperative for the times of the civil rights movement work in the 50s and 60s, and for the issues that we deal with, I believe, today. How do we achieve justice? What is justice? And how do we do this in a way that we are walking with our God and not engaging in violence, but engaging in the power of nonviolence to convert the hearts and minds of those who would oppress those with the least amount of power in our society. King spoke of this and spoke of particularly the idea of justice in several ways. One moment I'd like to share is from a speech that he gave in 1957. There's something unfolding in the universe, whether one speaks of it as an unconscious process, or whether one speaks of it as an unmoved mover, or whether someone speaks of it as a personal God. There's something in the universe that unfolds for justice. Justice being about creating right relationships. Justice in making sure that those that do not have. And that we all have a role to play in whatever we're called, in whatever ways that we're called to help bring about that justice in your community. But the ways in which King and Dr. King and others were engaged with this was not always, and most of the time wasn't, something that was comfortable, calm, and peaceful maybe in one's way, because the powers that be often do not react to that. And so the styles of organizing that took place during that time and are taking place today don't necessarily cause comfort and don't necessarily make the powers that be react the way, cause them to transform their thinking just because you provide them with a good argument. In the letter from the Birmingham jail, King spoke about this quite poignantly. And it's too long to read all of that, but I share with you just one section here, if you may grant me this. Quote, you may well ask, why direct action? Why sit-ins, marches, and so forth? Isn't negotiation a better path? You're exactly right to call for negotiation. Indeed, that is the purpose of direct action. Nonviolent direct action seeks to create such a crisis and establish such creative tension that a community that has consistently refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue. It seeks to dramatize the issue that it can no longer be ignored. It's been referred to that the creation of tension is the work of the nonviolent resistor. This may sound shocking, but I must confess that I am not afraid of the word tension. I have earnestly worked and preached against violent tension, but there is a type of constructive, nonviolent tension that is necessary for growth. Just as Socrates felt that it was necessary to create a tension in the mind so that individuals could rise from the bondage of myths and half-truths to the unfettered realm of creative analysis and objective appraisal. We must see the need for having nonviolent gadflies to create the kind of tension in society that will help men to rise from the dark depths of prejudice and racism to the majestic heights of understanding and brotherhood. These words and words such as these had a particular impact on myself as a young person. Once finishing my formal education, I found out about a program of community organizing and a program called Southern Empowerment Project, and it was operated by, or the training was led by leaders and community organizers. And from that, all these different ideas about justice and responsibility and what could I do about it swirled together and gave me answers and gave me a mission in terms of organizations that I began to work with. It also gave me the opportunity to attend and to go to and spend a lot of time at a place in East Tennessee called the Highlander Center, which many people may not be familiar or aware of the work of the Highlander Center. It's an organization that's been around almost 100 years. It's a place in the South that, in a time where segregation was at its height, that Black and white folks were able to gather together, share their stories, share their tactics and strategies, and return back to their communities and engage in those strategies and tactics to make change happen on the local level. So often I feel in this, when we talk about the King holiday in particular, there's a lot of emphasis on the passage of the civil rights legislation and the big national events that occurred. But what really has transformed the country is less what has happened nationally, but what happens locally, in the local community, how neighbors change and transform their own interactions with each other and make and work harder to create what King called the beloved community. King participated at the Highlander Center at its 25th anniversary event, and there's pictures of him there with Pete Seeger and Rosa Parks and other folks. And that's also something about Ms. Parks. She had attended a Highlander training the summer of 1955. She had been a longtime leader in her community there in Montgomery, Alabama, being an officer in the local NAACP. And in December of that year, 1955, decided to do a little direct action of her own. She wasn't tired. She wasn't just a little old lady, which I share with my students, the elementary students. I'm almost 20 years older than Ms. Parks, and at the time that she did her action, which they're often aghast. It's like, ooh, but you're really old. But being at Highlander myself years later, I've attended many trainings and had an opportunity to work with the staff there, and eventually was a longtime board member. But it gave me the blessing and opportunity to meet with contemporaries and peers of Dr. King and learn lessons of life about their work as organizers, as writers, as cultural workers in so many different ways that inspired and helped me in my work as an organizer. And I hope to think still in my work as a teacher, as a husband, as a parent, as a friend, and a neighbor, and a member of the various communities that I'm part of. Just wanted to share a few folks that I had the opportunity to meet. One of the first actually paid community organizing job, I worked in Louisville, Kentucky, and I part of the job was or part of the benefits. I got paid a little bit of money and was given a place to stay, and it was the home of a person named Ann Braden. And I have to admit, as a young person, I was like, I don't know who this person is, but sure, they give me a place to stay, that should be fine. I later found out Ann Braden was a long-term human rights and civil rights leader in her own accord in writing. She and her husband had been one of the leaders in desegregating housing in Louisville in the 1950s. And she was a contemporary of King in and of her own work there in Kentucky and throughout the South. From her, I learned the power of hospitality, because I thought, oh, here's this older white lady that's let me stay in her extra room. Isn't this nice of her? I later found out I was one of a long series of people of who had stayed in her home at some point, including Andrew Young, who was one of Dr. King's lieutenants, and later the ambassador to the United Nations and the mayor of Atlanta. Many other folks had done this as well, and it wasn't a big deal for her. Her thought on this was, here's an opportunity that I can provide some hospitality to folks. And she was always busy. She was a very busy person. Another person that I had an opportunity to get to know and to work with was Dorothy Cotton. Dorothy Cotton was also someone who worked on a day-to-day basis with Dr. King in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. She directed their education program. The education program was initially started at the Highlander Center, and then SCLC took it over and expanded it throughout the South. Throughout the early to mid 1960s, one of the ways that many of the Southern states attempted to keep people from registering to vote was you not only had to have literacy, which of course was inconsistently enforced because the literacy rate amongst white Southerners was not much higher at all than it was for African Americans, but you also were supposed to be able to interpret parts of the state constitution. I don't know many people who can do that today, but part of it was preparing folks for this, and that's what the education program did. And Dorothy Cotton was a person who did this, and so I had an opportunity to work with her on a committee at the Highlander Center. And I have to admit, again, being a young person, when I first met her, I was like, oh, this is a nice lady. Every time there was gatherings, she thought it was very important that we were singing songs and that folks were sharing songs, that was part of the power of building community is through song. And I'd heard these songs growing up. And so it was like, oh, okay, another one of these older people wanting us to sing "We Shall Overcome" and stuff like that. Later, when I found out who she was and overheard her saying one of the songs that we sang was like, yeah, that's one of the songs that Martin's mom taught me when we were going to Washington for the march. I was like, wait a minute, maybe I need to listen and not be so stupid. But from her, and as someone who, again, not only working with King, continued to do the work after his assassination, but brought such joy to talking about the communities that we can build, and brought such joy in song and learning of songs from other people and teaching other folks song, that sense of celebration. And here's someone at the point that I had met her, had lived much, there was a lot of tragedy in her life, but that wasn't what came from her. What came from her was a sense of celebration. And that, no, we're not where we want to be at, but we're getting there. And to get there, it requires celebration of the victories that we have and the joy that comes in the community that we're building as a beloved community on the way to that bigger world that we're hoping to create. And then last, this is where Sarah's like, you need to stop, come on. I can hear her right now. I had an opportunity to work with another peer of Dr. King, who was also doing organizing work in Charleston, South Carolina throughout the 50s and 60s with the labor community. A gentleman by the name of Isaiah Bennett. Another time I had an organizing job and was told, you're going to be working with Isaiah Bennett. I don't know who Isaiah Bennett is, thank you. And I get to meet this older gentleman who was also, it's also these people were so much kinder than me than they probably should have been. But we had a coalition, or there was a coalition of workers, environmentalists, pastors, and other concerned citizens in Charleston. The naval shipyard was closing, and that shipyard, there was a lot of construction and repair, and there were all of these workers who were about to be out of jobs. And the powers that be were basically like, well, we're just going to have to shut this thing down. And the coalition formed like, no, we need to see if we can attract other businesses to come here. We've got a workforce that's already trained. This is a great opportunity in many ways to expand jobs in the region. And so on a daily basis, I would come over to Isaiah's house and we'd kind of lay out what we were doing and who we were interacting with and what meetings were coming up and how we were going to be facilitating them as the organizing staff for the coalition. And on occasion, Isaiah would say, let's go for a walk. And so we would just go and walk around the block or blocks. And any person we met, he already knew them. And he didn't just know people, he knew who their relatives were. I still remember we were walking, it was a woman was walking as well, and he introduced himself, said hello, and it's like, I remember when you were working in the cigar factory back in '56, and the woman said, you know what, I had forgotten that I even worked there. It's like, yeah, and your sister was there afterwards. And it's like, yeah, that's right. And they engaged in a conversation that eventually led to us talking about the coalition and the efforts that were going on. He was always organizing, and he was always about community building and communication and sharing and talking with others and listening to others in a way that at the point he could have been just retired, but he continued to be involved in his organizing work there. And that was a lesson as well of the importance of not only listening, but also that you're constantly working to build community. But how is this relevant for today? So I'm going to bring this into conclusion. The conditions are not exactly the same, but there are many things today that could be just kind of, they're ripped from the headlines. It's like, is that folks with power are doing wrong against folks who don't have power or don't have much power, and are often scapegoating the people with the least amount of power and the least amount of ability to make changes as if they are the root of what is wrong, when that is not the case. And when those who do have the power could be doing so much more for good than blaming people. How is that community being built? It's like whether they're immigrants or people of color who look like immigrants or trans people whose very existence is being attacked and is being used as an like, we need to focus all these resources over here. Don't look and see what I'm doing in other countries. Don't look and see how I'm not taking care of healthcare. Don't look and see what's going on. How are we supporting education and young people in so many different ways? But we're going to blame the people who we think these powers that be have the least amount of power, that they're the ones that are responsible for whatever fears or that someone might have. And if we look in our own community, where there's literally a few hundred thousand, what is it, the numbers, like 300,000 jobs have been lost in the past year. And disproportionately, though the people who have lost those jobs have been Black women. It's not been some equitable number of who has jobs, but it's primarily been African American women. And things like diversity, equity, and inclusion. 3 words that don't all mean the same thing. They kind of getting lumped into the phrase DEI, and that being used as if it's a curse word, and that if you talk about diversity, if you talk about equity, if you talk about inclusion, that somehow you're doing something wrong. And that there are events that are being canceled that were part of the King celebration because they're DEI, you know. But the good thing in all of this, that there are people demonstrating. They're calling this out, they're organizing and mobilizing, and they're not just being calm, and they're not just waiting to see how this all works out. And I think this is the challenge for all of us in our own efforts to create that beloved community. We all have something we can do. Maybe your thing isn't going to a protest, but maybe you can make a sign. Maybe your thing isn't going to confront your legislator, but maybe you can make a phone call. But whatever is done needs to be done with others. The sense of being alone is a tactic in and of itself to defeat. To make you feel like you're the only person and that you're singularly by yourself is an intention to isolate. In one way or another, be if you're online with us, or if you're in the room, you're part of communities. Be it a member of the church, be it your neighborhood, where you work, other places you socialize, how you get along with maybe the other members in your family that you can talk to about stuff like this. That you need to be part of community, because all of what the civil rights movement, the freedom movement, Isaiah Bennett, Dr. King, Ann Braden, Dorothy Cotton, all the work that they were doing was not on their own. It was in partnership with others. Continue to find ways, be part of a community. Don't let yourself become isolated. And in the end, we will continue to make those steps towards that beloved community. Thank you. Okay, so at this time, let us prepare ourselves for communion. Sorry about that. But my daughter told me I did a good job. Here in Cedar Ridge, our tradition is we have stations here in 3 parts of our church. For communion, we have gluten-free crackers and grape juice that are representations of the last meal that Jesus shared with his closest apostles. And this is an opportunity for us to share in community and reflect on the bread, the wine, and what it means in the process of community, and taking the cup and the bread to nourish ourselves and to nourish our community. All folks can either hear or hear or let's stop.